Thank you. I said to Nigel a couple of days ago, I said, can I just do a little update on what I shared a fortnight ago? And he said, yes, do you want the whole hour? And I said, no, I'll be good. So I'm going to try and be good. And do about 10 minutes, 15 maybe at the tops. But I asked God this morning, I said, Lord, can you confirm it's right for me to share something this evening? So I'm going to start with something that happened to me today. We've been trying to get fibre broadband installed in our house, and that's another story. They failed again on Friday. So I had to ring BT or EE, you're never quite sure who you're talking to these days, but I rang them this morning, and I'm talking to this chap, and he says, yes, we can come next Friday, etc., etc. All this, and we were going through. He said, now, just before we complete this, and I can hit the go button, he said, I need to verify your ID. I went, what? I said, the guy yesterday didn't ask me to do this. And he said, oh, no, it started from today. I've been on training all week about verification of people's ID. I said, but I've had a BT account since 1986. You know who I am. He said, no, this is new, and we've got to do this verification of your ID. And I went, I want broadband, so I thought, right, okay, here we go. I said, well, what data do you want? Thinking I was going to have to run upstairs and find a passport and driving, the usual stuff. And he said, no, let's try. He said, can you give me your email address? And I said, yes, the one you've got on the account. He says, no, you have to give it to me. So I gave it to him, and he obviously typed it in. And he said, I need your date of birth. So I went, okay, here we go. Ding, 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 ding. He said, and he obviously then I heard a click, so he'd obviously hit enter. And he said, oh, that's all right, yeah, you've got a government ID, you exist. Well, let me put it this way. I was suspicious when I got a new driving licence. Any of you have to get a new driving licence, they now take a red photo and a green photo and a blue photo and a white photo, which actually comes up your full biometrics of your face. And I'm a trustee of a charity which is as a CIC, which is a charitable incorporated company, and therefore I have to be registered at Companies House, which I was. But now all trustees, irrespective of your charity, whether it's a CIC or not, in the next 6 months are going to have to verify your ID. And I know that Companies House, when I went to do it on Companies House, it says, can I have your email address? Can I have your date of birth? Bang, you exist, you've got a digital ID, you're already there. I thought the government hadn't to introduce digital ID, yet today, it's obviously I have a digital ID because it worked. And I'm thinking, so all I would say is, and I want to say this at the beginning, and one or two people have said, I really love when people question stuff and ask me questions, because one or two people have been in touch about last time. Can I just very clearly say, I don't think digital ID is the mark of the beast yet. We as Christians have got to decide how much we're going to go for. But it's going to reach a point where actually, I don't think we're going to be able to live without one for a season. But then it's how far is this going to be pushed? The thing I discovered yesterday was that actually most local authorities are now using the anti-terror legislation to track everybody. They're now using that for the facial recognition cameras. And it gives them permission now, if they've got any suspicions at all, to sort of follow you and see where you are and see where you're going and record all that sort of information. And I mean, the interesting one is, did you know that this week Sainsbury's have now turned on facial recognition? They've called it active facial recognition technology has been turned on in all Sainsbury's across the whole country this week. The little ones, big ones, whatever, like that one. And I told you things are moving so far, really amazing how quickly. But the thing about it is that we are very aware that our Prime Minister stood up and made a speech, didn't he, on Monday, about this stopping children being involved in and what they consider this protection of children. And as you know, as we say, if you want to make something happen, either have it under health and safety or child protection. You can get away with, I said, you almost get away with murder if you said it's either of those two issues. So they're now saying it's child protection, aren't they? And of course, What they're saying, and I just want to mention a few bits and pieces, they're now talking about this social media ban, aren't they? Well, actually, in Australia, which is held up as being the place of virtue, isn't it? 80% of the children have now got round it. That's what they reckon. And what was it, about 6 months the ban's been in place? So, you know, as I said to Helen, as soon as I heard this speech, it's not about banning, it's all about digital ID. I said that, and within hours, all of the new media, it was all over new media, and everybody was saying the same thing. It's all about digital ID. It's not about, because it's very interesting, because they're now, I don't know whether you looked, and I'll go through if you weren't familiar, you're going to need a digital ID, and this is kind of an impact on the church, and I'm going to mention Facebook and YouTube. Where do most churches now stream their services? Facebook, YouTube, or Vimeo. All three of those have come out and said you are going to need a digital ID to access them. Well, hang on, I've got a Google account, so Google know what I'm watching, but this is going to be a level above that. And of course, there's Instagram, Snapchat, etc. And it's going to be whether you upload and or view. But it gets even more interesting as I've started to read through. And can I make a suggestion? Go to .gov. and whatever, and they say where it says new plans, because the first word is not true. They're not new plans. They've been there for a while, and if you actually start to dig through, the government documents are all there, and I didn't bother printing any more off, but I found a whole load more today that go back anything up to 5 years. So it's been in the pipeline for a while. I think somebody wanted a bit of good news before Thursday, I think. But there we go. So anybody who's going to do it's uploading or viewing, and as I said, it's digital ID by the back door. That's that. I mean, I think everybody is now saying that. But the interesting thing is it says adults, and this is reading from here, and I'm going to leave out some of the words because we don't need them. It says adults will, of course, be able to share or view everything on phones, etc., via an age verification process. That's in paragraph 2. Okay? And it then says, now is the time for tech companies to step up and work with the government to solve this horrific issue. It's all about what the children are viewing. That's the whole premise. It says, if companies do not act within 3 months... That is within 3 months of the 8th of June, not 3 months of any legislation, because it says later on. The government will then bring forward legislation to force them to activate the technology. Okay, this is the way they're going to go. As if you've got an iPhone, you will already be familiar with the fact that your iPhone or your iPad have been asking you to do an age verification recently under the recent update. Apple have already done this. You may not be aware that, of course, it then means that Android and Windows and Mac OS are all going to follow suit pretty quickly. So when you log on to your Windows PC, it's going to ask you to age verify that who you are on your PC linked across to your account. The fact that, you know, if you're like me, my Office 365 is paid by a credit card is not going to be good enough. They're going to want me to do an ID. And it says, and now this is quite interesting, and I'm just picking lines, it says that they are going to block, this device has to block any inappropriate images across the whole device by default. So they're immediately moving from, you know, your various things like YouTube and Facebook. For a technology point of level, they're moving down into the device itself. This is what it says in this. I'm reading directly from here. There's a whole lot of the usual waffle. Okay. But it says, there's 2 lines here that don't add up. And it says, these companies must introduce these measures without threatening privacy or collecting any data. Right? I'm going to read a whole paragraph to you. Right? So, companies must not introduce these measures without threatening privacy or collecting any data. The device should simply block harmful content across all apps and services. Over 18s will still be able to view adult content and other content by proof of age. Hang on. They're not going to collect any data, and they want you to put your age in by some means or other. Hang on, that's one paragraph. So isn't age data? Well, I would have thought it is. But then it gets even more interesting, and you know me, I like a good dig, so I had a bit of dig about this company. And it says it then comes into this thing called, this company called Safe2Net. This is a company who are overseeing it. Guess who's written the policy? Safe2Net are the chief advisors to the government who've actually written the draft policy. This, of course, is so you don't have to dig very far to find, if you look up Safe2Net, you'll find advisors to the government on e-safety. And even more interesting is that they then have a piece of technology called Harm Block, which they say is a proven example that it works, and it will be included in all operating systems that people use. So the company who've designed the policy are the people who've written the software, which is going to be implemented by all of the main companies into the... It sounds like you know. And also the thing about it is, if you start to look it up, people have said you cannot get it off your device once it's on there. Doesn't matter how you try, even if you try rolling back the operating system for the techie people who know that sort of stuff, you can't. It won't come off your machine. And the question then is, what else is it going to be used to scan for and look for? So I would if you want to have if you can't sleep, go and look this up. It makes interesting reading. And they've got all the sort of lovely people who are saying how wonderful this is going to be. Strategy director of this, and the CEO of Welsh Women's Aid, and the NSPCC, and Bernardo's, and various foundations. They're all coming out and saying, oh, isn't this going to be wonderful? Yeah, yawn, yawn, yawn. They're all saying the same thing. But the point being is that it's not about the social media ban. It's all about trying to control us as human beings. But I don't know whether you noticed that it's actually got even more interesting since Monday. Because everybody's virtually... BT, as I said, BT and EE have put in ID this today. That wasn't there yesterday. Hang on, the announcement was only on Monday. The other one that I came across is, I don't know if you've heard about this lady called Liz Kendall. She is the Science and Technology Secretary to the government. She's actually now turned round and says in order to get round this, you can get round this by using what are called VPNs. If you know what a VPN is, you'll understand, but if you don't, can I just put it this way? Many companies legitimately they're going to ban the use of VPNs in this country from July. Well, let me put it this way. All teachers, every single teacher in the UK uses a VPN to access their data at school on their own computer. Every single member of the teaching staff, because it was recommended and is implemented by a very large educational IT supplier who are up in Didcot. I'm not going to name them for various reasons. Anybody who remotely works from home uses a VPN. I was talking to other people and they've said, well, I don't know how we're going to work remotely. And a lot of companies who don't buy their own don't buy computers for their employees, you bring your own laptop because you like your own laptop, has a VPN installed on it so you can access the work stuff at work or work stuff at home, and it protects everything. So they're going to ban all of those. And I suppose it will mean all the civil service will have to go back into the office. I suppose that's one good advantage. Maybe you'll get some answers. But just throw that one out. There's all this knee-jerk reaction about trying to make this happen. The BBC on Thursday and ITV have said that they are going to require age verification in order to access their programmes. I don't know how they're going to do that, how they're going to guarantee that in one house you haven't if you've ever used iPlayer, doesn't it say, have you got a TV licence? And you say yes, and it works. Doesn't it? I mean, if you've ever used iPlayer, obviously that's going to become... So we've got all this sort of thing going on. Interestingly, and I'll just keep adding, Uber emailed all its customers this week to say they're implementing digital ID from the autumn for the security of customers and their drivers. Zoom, how many of us use Zoom? Well, Zoom are going to introduce, you can find this week there in the Zoom release, because I still get that, because I used to be responsible for Zoom across an educational trust. For some reason, they still keep sending me to my personal email updates. That they are going to introduce from January 2027 biometric or digital ID for all people who want to use Zoom. So if you want to use Zoom to have a and Zoom is used for prayer meetings and church meetings and all that sort of bits and pieces. It's interesting that suddenly all these companies are jumping in and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other. And they haven't even passed the legislation yet. It was just the Prime Minister standing up at a tech fair on Monday reading from this document. But immediately people have jumped on the bandwagon. So I offer that to you as a little update. I've just been amazed that every day I have this pad that I write down various bits and pieces in our kitchen. Which pad am I picking up? I know Helen says, oh, you're scribbling again, and I'm scribbling in one pad or the other for various sermon preps and that sort of thing. This one has been on fire this week. But all I would say is I want to leave us with a verse. James 1 verse 5 says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God who gives abundantly. We as Christians are going to need abundant wisdom in the days that lie ahead. You know, I think, we're not going to be able to avoid it, but we need to be wise and look at what we do and how we do it and various bits and pieces like that. And the interesting thing is that the person who won the Mayfield by-election, I'm not naming who it is, for I prefer YouTube not to count this as political. Interestingly, his mayoral training he was trained at Harvard, by the way, to become a mayor. And it was all of his political campaigns so far have been funded by the Bloomberg Foundation. And the Bloombergs, along with Bill Gates, and along with BlackRock, are of course buying up vast amounts of land in the UK and the US. So isn't that interesting that, somebody wants to...
Yeah, just a question about the ID. Is it just this country, or is it...
Well, at the moment, it's only in the UK. But... I mean, France has lost a third of its data because they tried to implement some sort of half-hearted system and they'd lost about a third of their data's been hacked, they estimate. So, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it'll be, I suspect it'll be pan-Europe because they'll then say, oh yes, if you've got your digital ID, you won't have to queue for 3 hours at Calais to come home. I mean, that will be that your passport won't be good enough. I can see that happening. So anyway, there we go. I offer that to you, and we need to just be wise and just praise God for his wisdom. I'm going to pray for Nigel.